Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets, where we decode the art and science of building a thriving coaching business. Let's see what's in store today with none other than the legend himself, Karl Bryan, and of course, your host, the Road Dog. Shoots.
Yo, 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 Road Dog. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. How are you, sir?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I got started at 4 a.m. this morning, so we're midday here, and we're rocking, bud. We're having a productive day. So that's a good day.
There you go. The 4 a.m. Is 4 a.m. the new 6 a.m.? It used to be the 6 a.m. club, then became the 5 a.m. Like, is it just, when do we get to the point where it's just don't ever go to sleep? When is it?
Yeah, I don't believe in those. You know, it's funny because people, they say, you know what I mean, that you got to wake up at 5 a.m. to get rocking. That's, I think, really bad advice. I used to be a night owl for a decent percentage of my life, and I got things done between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. that I just couldn't get done during the day, and I was highly, highly productive. So, yeah, so that, but, you know, kids and family and all that stuff changes it all. So 4 a.m. and that's not, you know, I'm more of a 5 a.m. guy, but anyways, so today we were rocking. I got up and, you know, you're just looking to get a list of things to do and you just get started and then you get on a bit of a roll and then you get some momentum and you start knocking things over. So.
Well, this is a great segue because you talk about the night owl, which there's a lot of those folks out there. And I used to be one of those myself. And, you know, you just got to go with what works for you. But here's the perfect segue. Trial and error. Talk to me about trial and error as a strategy, because even with something like this, hey, you don't know what works for you until you try it. But talk to me about just in general, trial and error as a strategy.
Good question, by the way. I would say it's for what I describe as wingers, right? Where they wing everything. They wing their presentation. They wing their closing calls. They wing their elevator pitch when they go to the networking function, etc. Generally speaking, and there's nuances like crazy, but it's a bad idea and very expensive. So if you were asked me for the anecdote, what would I recommend? Rather, modeling is 100 times as powerful as trial and error. Frankly, that's why I built the Jumpstart 12 into our software, because fundamentally it's something that you can install into a business properly and profitably, right? So just how do I get there? You know, I reverse engineered success. I just reverse engineered the most successful companies in the world. Keeping in mind, this was like a decade and a bit ago, but McDonald's, Disney, UPS, Subway, etc. I worked with Rent-A-Wreck many, many years ago. I reverse engineered their business, and then I modeled the successful models, right? And by the way, I also reverse engineered, back then, Tony Robbins, Jay Abraham, Dan Kennedy. They were the big dogs. They had the most expensive and what I would say were the best business programs at the time. They all had the exact same 12 areas dialed in. They called them something different, and there were some nuances, let's call it. But at the end of the day, their programs had the exact same areas. There was like literally no exceptions, which kind of just blew me away. So basically, so rather than use trial and error, I reverse engineered success, and I used modeling to create like a wildly profitable system that business coaches can install for the local business, following the model of something like McDonald's, not trial and error. And by the way, I think maybe once you've modeled, I think trial and error then comes into it. It's like a sales script. If you've got somebody gives you a successful sales script, and a successful sales script is one that has been used tried, true, proven to work for an individual, hopefully multiple individuals. So you're best to memorize that, get it right, and then make your adjustments for your personality and your style, as opposed to what most people do. They kind of look at it and then they wing it, right? They use kind of trial and error and just kind of go for it. So, again, you optimize, you tweak, but you don't want to start with guessing. You don't want to start with trial and error. So generally speaking, I'll say from a business standpoint for business coaches and business owners, trial and error, despite being a very popular, let's call it a methodology, I think it's a very expensive one and not the one that I would encourage.
Perfect. Now, talking of things not winging it and staying in, wait for the flow, let's go right to our Zen thought of the week there, Big Shoots.
Zen. Okay, I thought about this one. That's a good thing. So I wrote this in a daily email. And it's like, when you ask a kid if they can play the guitar, right? How do they answer? And with predictability, they'll say something to the effect of, I'm not sure, I've never tried, right? But then you ask an adult, and what do they say? And they say, oh, no, I can't play the guitar. And they'll follow that up with identity and follow that up with cementing it. Like, I don't have a musical bone in my body, right? And I just think that you really want to approach things, business, Facebook ads, social media, depending upon what you're doing, certainly, selling, coaching, etc. You want to take it from, like, I talk to people time and time again, and I say, rank yourself out of 10 in sales, and then they'll rank themselves 2 and they'll follow that up with, I'm just not any good at it, right? And that's a bad idea. As I always say, marginal gains. If you improve 1% a day for 365 days, you get a 37x return. I don't care how bad you are at selling. If we take your current talents and multiply them by 37, you'll be pretty damn good at it. And then on the flip side, those that are not, they got the silver tongue and they can sell ice to Eskimos, but then they're not very good at the coaching. Again, what I'd encourage them to do is improve 1% a day for an entire 365 days, 37x their talents in coaching. And guess what? Bingo, bango, bongo. They're a monster. They're awesome. Right. And again, don't use trial and error. Use something like what we have created that you can install into businesses as opposed to, guesswork and fundamentally winging it. And I would also, so on that note, what I would say is, like, when you're procrastinating, you're not lazy, you're lost, right? So what do you got to do? You got to find yourself. How do you find yourself? Define exactly what it is that you want. And as we always say, and we've said many times, it's one of the hardest things that you'll ever do is define what it is that you want. Like I've seen successful people, and then I see people who make a lot of excuses, but rarely do I see somebody that is successful that makes excuses, right? It's like the shorter time between idea and action, the more money you're going to make, right? So don't procrastinate, just go. What does Zuckerberg say? Move fast and break things. It's like, it's not do, have, be. It's be, do, have. Be, do, have. So when you're defining what it is that you want, you've really got to embody, like not only define what you want, but then embody that person, right? And if that's somebody who moves fast, because remember, money loves speed, right? Apparently Zuckerberg, it's worked out pretty well for him. He says, move fast and break things. So as I say that, I would imagine you'd agree. But I look at the last week, the last fortnight, the last month, the last quarter, the last year, how quickly have you moved and how many things have you broken, right? And again, not winging it, not guessing, but looking at, modeling things that have worked and then putting them into practice and then adjusting, tweaking, and optimizing as you go, right? Again, money loves speed, move fast, model, and learn to install, find a system that you can install for small business owners that is wildly profitable, and then just go for it. And again, get 1% better over 12 months. And guess what? You 37x your talents. So stay away from winging it, stay away from trial and error, and go to modeling and moving fast. So that's my, and as I finish that, I gotta, I don't know how Zen like that is, Shoots, as usual, but anyways, that's.
Well, you know what? It's very half Australian, very British of you to say last fortnight. I'm not sure how relatable that is to anybody in North America, but yes, bi-weekly it is, Shoots. Bi-weekly it is.
There we go. Okay. I lived in Australia for a long, long time, and I live on a British island, so everybody's so many Brits here. So I apologize, but a fortnight, it's 2 weeks, folks. It's 2 weeks.
Tell me you've been out of Canada for way too long, Shoots, without telling me you've been out of Canada for way too long. Hey, coaches, this is our wheelhouse, and do you believe, and this is perhaps a tangent, so I apologize, but do you believe that there are different levels of coaches? Like, in your opinion, you think that there's tiers almost of different coaches?
Ooh, yeah, I like that. I would absolutely say yes. In my opinion, there could be a lot of different levels, right? But I would bring it down to three. Number three, if you understand numerology, there's magic in threes, right? So that's why every professional sport is pretty much 3 words. The National Football League, then they bring it back to an acronym of 3 letters, NFL. Usually use 3 colors, by the way, not by accident. Anyway, so 3 levels. So there's the hiders, there's the wingers, I mentioned that a minute ago, and then there's the installers, right? So hiders, they hide behind their computer, stare at the phone, and experience pain. Okay, so those are the hiders, and there's lots of them. And then there's the wingers, right? And the wingers can make, $100,000, a number of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and do pretty darn well. But what do? They wing it. Again, they wing their presentation, they wing their opening, they wing their close, they wing the content. They don't practice. Remember, they study, but then they don't train. Remember the difference between studying and training? Studying, it's listening to the podcast, it's doing the course, it's sitting in the classroom. But then training is doing it over and over and over again, so it becomes instinctual, right? The wingers don't do that. So they wing everything. Every time they work with a client, it's a little bit different. So you got wingers, and then the elite is the installers, where they have a system, they follow a system, they keep their clients out of the weeds, which I've talked about a few times in the last number of podcasts. They keep them out of the weeds, and then they install something that was modeled. They don't guess. They're not winging what they're installing. They've got a proven, profitable system that they install into a business. Just think, again, you reverse engineer McDonald's and you can see that they've got 12 specific areas dialed in. Well, I think that those would be a really good 12 areas to dial in with the chiropractor, the dentist, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Will some work a little bit better than others? The answer is absolutely. So there's nuances to it, but effectively what they do is they install they have a system for their coaching, and then they would install it, right? Like if I went and did like a Facebook ad campaign for pest control, as an example, with 100% certainty, what would I do? I have got a model that we have created with focus.com that works very, very well. And I would use that as the framework, and then I would install the same framework, the same methodology, the same system for the pest control industry and mobile dog care and chiropractors and dentors, etc. So that's there's kind of the hiders, there's the wingers, and then there's the installers. And what I encourage you to do is commit with 100% certainty with your soul, not just your mind, but your soul, to become an installer. And here's the bad news for the hiders and the wingers. They get clients, and then what happens? They lose clients. Well, who do they lose the clients to? And I'm going to tell you that it's an installer comes along often with a better, more predictable, easier to follow. See, when you install a system that works, it's really easy for you to follow, and it's really easy for your client to follow. So when your client tries to take you into the weeds and talk about marriage problems and staff problems and diet problems and health problems, etc., it's really, really easy to get them back on the railroad tracks to follow it. Right. So again, so the bad news for the hiders and wingers is that installers come along, and it's not necessarily today, tomorrow, or next week, but it does tend to happen. And they end up taking your clients. So wingers tend to get clients and then lose them at the 3, 6, 9, 12, 18-month mark, right? The installers keep them. If you see focus.com, we've got a list of clients that have been with us for well over a decade, right? By the way, on a month-to-month agreement. We've got a system that we have installed that we follow, all backed by software, etc. Anyway, so and speaking of the software, though, and maybe again, so if you were to ask me what's the foundation of it, the foundation of profit acceleration, right? Or you build profit acceleration software, the foundation of it is compounding. Well, the first principle of compounding, the problem with compounding is what? It takes time. The business owners that I meet, and I'm guessing the business owners that you meet, guess what? They don't have any time, right? So that's the problem. So compounding sounds good, but it takes too much time. So again, you often lose your client to an installer. Well, marginal utility theory is the foundation of compounding, the first principle of compounding. And that's what basically profit acceleration is built off, the system that we install, right? So basically it is small incremental improvements in multiple areas simultaneously. So you get this compounding effect, compounding financial effect without the use of time. So anyways, translation, I think you should commit to becoming an installer. I think that's where the magic is. And there are 3 levels of coaches, or there's different levels of coaches. I'll break it down into 3. Don't be a hider. Maybe you're going to be a winger for a period of time, and you can get to X amount of success, but ultimately you want to become an installer. And to become an installer, you've got to find somebody with a system that is duplicatable, that is profitable, that'll work with your clients. And that's my answer, Shoots. What do you think?
So on that note, I want to circle back on something, because I believe there's a bit of a tie-in here, because again, it's all about taking that action and being an installer, as you keep saying. But you were talking about valuation and scale. And I really, I don't know why it triggered this in me, but I'm like, man, can you give me an example of a business that can easily scale?
Okay. Never easy, first of all. Let's not pretend. Remember, scale, again, growth is when the company grows and expenses come with it. Scale is when the company grows and then expenses stay the same, right? So Facebook can plug in said this a million times, but Facebook can plug in 1 million people tomorrow and probably not hire a single person, right? So what I would say this is, you want to cash in a perfect world, and it is not a perfect world, but you want a cash forward business model, right? So Amazon, as an example, they get paid and then they deliver the book, they deliver the goods, right? So that's cash forward. They got their cash and then they deliver it. An inferior business model that will not scale nearly as well is, say, let's use a builder, right? So they build a house and then they get paid after. That business will never scale because of the financial model, right? Or like a semi-famous example of this is Dell Computers. So Dell Computers used to have, all kinds of inventory and all kinds of computer on hand. And then you would go to Dell.com and then you would buy your computer, and then somebody would go into the warehouse, find the particular computer you want, and then send it off, right? Well, they then said, well, hang on, they didn't want to have inventory. They wanted to create a cash forward business. So what they did is, you go to Dell, you build the computer, they build the computer, and then they send it to you, right? So they went from a non-cash forward model to a cash forward model. And guess what? The Dell computer that you know today basically came off the back of that, right? So if you want to scale and grow the amount of money, it's the same, but riskier if it's not a cash forward model, right? So you ask me a business that is easier to scale. Show me one that is cash forward and it's easier to scale. You show me something like a builder that is not cash forward, and I'll show you a business that's not only difficult to scale, but borderline impossible, right? And they could get around that with things like franchising as an example, but that's a different topic maybe for a different day. And by the way, Salesforce, again, I've got a famous example of this where they used to basically have a monthly subscription where you'd go there and just for easy math, let's say they charge you $100 a month. And what did they had to do? As they grew, they had to raise unbelievable amounts of capital to keep going. Why? Because they were getting $100 to deliver on something that costs significantly more than $1,000 up front to engage with a new client, with the training and the setup, etc. But what they did is they changed their model to cash forward. And guess what? You paid 12 months in advance, literally changed everything. They, got to the point where they could basically self-finance it. And guess what? Salesforce that you know today comes off the back of that example. So again, an example of a business that will scale. You just look at the financial model and you can see why this thing is never going to scale. And that, again, coaches, the reason why it's a very sexy industry and a great way to make unbelievable money. Because remember, we make 80% margins in coaching. The dentist, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, they're playing with 10 to 20% margins, and we're playing with 80% margins. That's why it's such an amazing industry. And by the way, generally, there are nuances, and there's some that will adjust this, but you get paid, you get paid first, and then you start the work, right? So again, it's got that cash forward component to it. Not to mention you get to work from home while you're on vacation, etc. It's a great business. And that is why if I channel my inner Warren Buffett, he would tell you that coaching consulting is a business worth, fighting and pushing through because of those amazing margins. He always says you want to, buy it for a penny, sell it for $1 and have it habit forming. Coaching's got a lot of that. So, and remember, Warren Buffett, at the end of the day, he is a consultant. He provides time and money for businesses that he believes he can impact profitably. If he doesn't believe that he can impact your business profitably, and go back over the last 50 years, he doesn't invest time or money in your company, right? So again, people don't think about Warren Buffett as a consultant, but he's, again, one of the greatest business consultants, one of the greatest business minds, frankly, but one of the greatest business consultants of all time. Like, give me another industry where you can turn 60 and start signing autographs, right? And I can tell you, a business can, like, think of the Warren Buffetts and the Mark Cubans and the Barbara Corcorans, etc. Right? It's an awesome business. Outside of owning a sports team, by the way, that's another way that you can start signing autographs at the age of 60. But not many industries you're going to do that. You're not going to start a building company and then start signing autographs as a general rule, unless you write a great book or something along those lines. Again, which means you fundamentally went into consulting, coaching, training. Anywho, shoots, cash forward would be what I would say. Shoots.
So I hate to fact check you like this straight on the podcast and blow your freaking collective minds, but this is happening in the moment here, folks. I just asked AI, what is the profit margin of a candlestick maker? Yes, Shoots.
What is
it? Okay, you said what? 10 to what?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
If
you're talking about the margin on the candle, you're talking gross profit margins or net profit margins. We got to look at this.
Right now, all I feel is you're backtracking. You're being like a politician. Let's just call it what it is. The candlestick making business profit margins generally range from 30 to 70%. And some sources suggest even higher margins, potentially reaching 80% or more for specific vessels when selling wholesale, according to Makesy. That's because there it is.
That's why I've been talking about candlestick makers for so long. Dang.
And I had no idea. And I don't think anyone did. Like, why always butchers? Maybe. Bakers? Sure. Candlestick makers? But here we are, folks. This is what it is. So just, the cogs when it comes to candlestick making is the wax, fragrance, jars, labels, and other supplies directly impact the profit margin. There it is. So anyways, hate to call you out like that, but perhaps the question was, an example of a business that can scale easily, I think we're all in the wrong business. I think business coaching, sorry folks, it's dead. We're all getting into candlestick making, and this will now be the candlestick making secrets going forward.
That'd be a good podcast. I'd listen.
You know what? I just think of the different topics. What kind of wax are you using? You know, like all these fascinating topics. What kind of wick? I don't even know. These are things I just don't know.
The different directions you could go. Shoots, we might have just launched a number of businesses just now. Let's go.
100%. 100%. You know what? You're welcome, everybody. Hey, listen, on that tone of past questions and things that have come up, there was do you remember a couple months ago you were talking about Flywheels?
Yeah, absolutely. Got a lot of feedback.
So I had a bunch of questions come in on it, and really what people are, I guess, wondering, is there one for business coaches, like for that they can, I guess, easily understand, because some of these things can get quite complex, but is there a specific flywheel, like what would you say is the number one that they could model inside of their own coaching business?
Yeah. Okay. This is a good question. So first of all, you need to understand the foundation of a flywheel first, right? So a flywheel, when done properly, it speeds up and expands, right? So you go Disney, McDonald's, Apple, Amazon, etc. They could never achieve what they have achieved without a flywheel working in their favor, right? So think like wealth is accumulated, not earned. Okay. So again, there's a flywheel effect there. In fact, I bought a domain name as an example for a decent price tag just this week. If I do nothing with it for 10 years, I think that it'll be worth 5 to 10x what I bought it for. Well, I assume. I think I got a great deal on it. Zero guarantees, by the way, but it's an asset that I'm willing to bet on, right? So like domains, no doubt you're familiar with them, but I don't know how familiar. Domains are like virtual real estate. I own hundreds of them, and I think it's a really solid investment. It's an asset that I would be encouraging business coaches to be thinking about, learning about. Look, learning before you invest in anything, you got to learn as much as you can about it. So understand what they're worth, how to use them, etc. But end of the day, so again, wealth is accumulated as opposed to earned, right? That's important. Got a flywheel effect. But so back to your question, the best flywheel for a business coach to understand. I would, like, there's lots of them. I mean, again, almost like what we encourage you when I talk about flywheels, what I'd encourage you now is to start thinking in flywheels wherever you can, right? So I would say, I would ask the question, why does a business owner advertise? They're trying to build a profitable business so that the business owner can become free, right? Why do they go to the networking function? Again, they're trying to, generate leads, get new clients, to build revenue, etc. Why does somebody do a Facebook ad campaign? Why do they advertise on TikTok and do reels and advertise on YouTube and start a YouTube channel, right? So let's just go advertising because it's a really easy one, right? Well, think flywheel here. So picture a clock. Okay. So they advertise so that they can get leads. Why do they want leads? They can get hot prospects to sell to. Why do they want hot prospects to sell to? So they can get clients, so that they can get revenue, so that they can get profit, so they can build wealth, and then they can achieve freedom, right? So people go into business to achieve freedom. But keep in mind, my freedom, Road Dog's freedom, and your client's freedom will be different, but fundamental. There's time, there's financial, there's mental. Freedom of movement is a big one, freedom of association, etc. Right? So if you picture that as a flywheel, which I want you to think clock, and the reason I refer to it as a clock, because when done improperly, which it usually does, it is done, it goes counterclockwise. So it eats itself. And again, people wonder, why am I not having success? Why am I going backwards? Why is this not working? I'm constantly going uphill and never feeling like I'm going downhill? Translation, flywheel working in your favor. It's because, again, it's done improperly. So it goes counterclockwise. So picture this as a clock. You've got freedom at 12 o'clock. Right. So that's the business owner's goal. And then where we go 2 o'clock, that's leads. And then 4 o'clock, that'll be clients. And then 6 o'clock, revenue. And then 8 o'clock, profits. 10 o'clock, build wealth, and then back to 12 o'clock, freedom, right? So the better that's done, if the ads work, then guess what? They're going to get closer to freedom. When they spend 12, 24 grand a year on an ad that does not work, do they get closer to freedom or further away from freedom? Do they experience more frustration or less frustration, right? And frustration is probably something that they would deem to be the opposite of freedom. Again, going in the wrong direction, right? So again, the question is, does the ad get them closer to freedom? The answer is no. So what they really got to be doing is they need to solve, like, the ad doesn't solve the real problem. It's the Band-Aid. It's very similar to somebody with a health problem, high blood sugar, or high blood pressure, going to the doctor and then getting prescribed a pill, but then never actually going to the root cause. You got to drink more water. You got to get a better diet. You need to exercise regularly. You got to, get less stress in your life, etc. Right. And again, the foundation of that is why I built profit acceleration software. I didn't build revenue acceleration software. I didn't build client acceleration software. I built profit acceleration software. Profit is the domino that knocks over the other dominoes. Again, think flywheel, right? You make $1 and they keep 20 cents roughly. They got 20% net margins. They save $1, they keep 100 cents. As a business coach, early on in your relationship, you're $2 grand a month, 24 grand a year. Where's a smarter place to start? We know the answer, right? And yes, they need to grow. I want to make sure it's not all about save, save, save. I recognize that. I know that. I agree with that. They do need to grow, but they need to do it with margins intact. Okay. Ideally growing. Because again, the business owner grows from 500 grand to 1.5 million. And then at 1.5 million, they're making less or a negligible amount more than they were at 500 grand. Is that further away from freedom or is that closer to freedom? And I'm going to tell you that it is absolute nuances. Yes, market share would come into it. And if you've learned from Jeff Bezos, you know that there's nuances to this, but generally speaking, we're not all pretending we're Jeff Bezos here. Our clients are Jeff Bezos because they are not. They're going in the wrong direction. But for me, look, here's one that we've talked about. The most important flywheel for me is your future, your client's future, right? So it goes thoughts. I'm going to think back here. Thoughts, actions, behaviors, outcomes, lifestyle, and then back to your future, right? So let me try draw that up as a flywheel, or I'm going to draw that up as a clock. You got your future at 12 o'clock. Okay, so that's presumably the goal, right? And then you got thoughts at 2 o'clock, actions at 4 o'clock, behaviors at 6 o'clock, outcomes at 8 o'clock, lifestyle at 10 o'clock, and then back to your future at 12 o'clock, right? And again, if done properly, the flywheel turns, right? So again, the flywheel, when done properly, it speeds up and expands. When done improperly, it acts as a clock going counterclockwise and effectively eats itself. And again, as I said, like most business models are broken before you start. An example, like, we're in the coaching space. I'll meet a career coach with consistency. A career coach, what's your job? Your job is to help somebody get a raise, get a promotion, get a new job. Well, the better you are at it, the quicker you solve that problem, the quicker you lose your client and have to go back into lead generation, right? It's like the business model is broken before you start, and then I'll meet a grief coach. What's the goal of a grief coach? To get you out of grief. Well, the better they get at it, the quicker they do it, the quicker they lose their client, the client moves on, you move on, and you got to go back into lead generation. Does that get you further away or closer to freedom? And I'm going to say that it gets you significantly further away from freedom, and quite frankly, creates a really frustrated career coach. What do I say? Grief coach and life coach. I give you the example of life coaching falls into that. Again, life coaches keep their clients for short periods of time, right? Whereas a business coach can keep somebody for a decade, because as the business grows, when somebody grows from 500 grand to $1 million, despite the fact that that's their goal, do they have more problems at $1 million or less problems? And the answer is more problems with ridiculous predictability. And then they grow to 3 million. More problems or less problems? And the answer is more staff, more clients, more headaches, more distribution, more logistics, etc. So anyway, so again, control your thoughts and you control your outcomes. Control your outcomes and you control your future is the way that I would dummy down that flywheel. Like Elon Musk, he looks for big problems and then solves them, right? He's a trillionaire in the making. Well, he's having a tough time right now, frankly. But, the alien just trying to get home, I think he's going to be okay financially. But anyway, so that's the way I would say the advertising flywheel would be the most important one to understand from a business standpoint. And then I think your future flywheel from a personal development, from a personal development standpoint, from a peak performance standpoint, that's the one that I would use as a bit of a model. And then you adjust. But what I'd encourage you to do is to be thinking, trying to think in flywheels. Very powerful. What do you think, Shoots? You like that?
Two things. First off, the one is just sort of, have you seen the new ads for Polestar? The other electric car company or whatever?
No, I haven't.
Basically, it's like no mission to Mars. Like, it's just full on. Oh, it's actually like, well done, like, way to throw stones at your competition. But
create an enemy.
This is it, right? And again, right now for 50% of America, a common enemy. So there's that. You said something there. I want to touch on this because perhaps I've been thinking of flywheels completely wrong. You mentioned there's the flywheel, but then you said, and it makes it turn. Yep. What do you mean by makes it turn?
Okay, so leads become hot prospects, become clients, which becomes revenue. Like, you see how this is turning, right? But we got to start at the lead. And then we go to, where was I? Revenue, and then profit. Revenue is not profit. And then, by the way, we could go cash, which I don't think I said that, but cash and profit are two different things. And believe me, they want cash. Business, you go at a monopoly for one reason and one reason only. You run out of cash. You go at a business for one reason and one reason only. You don't run out of passion. You don't run out of opportunities. You don't run out of, bandwidth. You run out of cash, right? That's why somebody goes out of business. So it's the flywheel. So you go from leads, what did I say? From leads to hot prospects to clients to revenue to profit to cash to building a successful business to achieving wealth to freedom. Right. So the better your leads work, the closer you're going to get to freedom, assuming that wheel is turning. And then you turn the tap on and you buy more advertising, then that is going to turn and it is going to expand. And you can create a killer business on the back of that. Like, because we sometimes slag advertising. Like, advertising to profit is a superpower. So in no way am I suggesting that they shouldn't advertise. What they should do is they need to have something, they need to interrupt, engage, educate, and offer in their advertising. And if I show you the average ad, it's just a blown up business card with the name at the top, service, quality, dependability in the middle, the phone number and the web address at the bottom, and some lame offer, if any offer, and it's like free estimates. But everybody in the entire industry offers a free estimate, so you don't get any value for that. It's nothing compelling, right? So if they're spending 24 grand a year on that ad, and freedom to them is being able to take their kids to Disneyland, I'm going to suggest you either got to, you got to tighten up that ad and create an interrupt and engage and educate and offer component to it, or you turn it off and take your kids to Disneyland and accomplish what it is that you're trying to actually accomplish. And you get there by defining what it is that you want. But at the end of the day, that it speeds up and it expands.
The reason that it kind of hit me, for whatever stupid reason, is I always looked at it as more of a static rather than dynamic.
No, flows. Yeah, and then the better you get your ads become, the tighter your avatar, the better the leads, right? So now you can start going after affluent people as opposed to some of the folks that might otherwise be attracted to your ad when you're in the sandbox.
Well, and again, that's just different copy in terms of just the language that they're just asking themselves different questions. The guy that's going out to buy the 25, and there's no car for 25 grand. The guy that's out there buying the $40,000 Toyota has a very different mindset than the guy that's going out and spending $150,000 for the Mercedes, right? It's just, they go to different restaurants, right? It's just different. But what was interesting in this process here is, and this is where a lot of businesses fall down, is they move to the next step of the flywheel and then they almost neglect the previous step.
Yeah, and correct. And guess what? Like Profit, as an example, they jack up the clients, they jack up the revenue, but they don't jack up the profit and the cash. And all of a sudden, guess what? They end up with this business where all of a sudden they're like, it's the end of the month and I got this profitable business, but I got no cash to pay my staff. What the hell's going on?
Too much month at the end of the money. Shoots.
There you go, Shoots. Actually, I want to give an example there that might, so like when advertising for coaches. So if I want to get a lot of opt-ins, okay, I will advertise how to generate leads for your coaching business, right? Now that'll bring in the most leads with predictability, but it also brings in the lowest quality on average. So then you go up and then you go up a tier and you go build the correct strategy for your coaching company. Okay. So as an example, go after a niche would be an example. Okay. I'll get a lot less opt-ins for that, but I'll get a higher quality when I advertise, let me help you pick your niche. Right. So that's like second level. But then we go to the third level and I advertise, we promote the language that we use. We say, become the best business coach you can be. Right. So we do that with an example. We teach people how to read financial statements. Right. Well, become the best business coach you can be, and install a system into your clients' as businesses. We'll get the least amount of clicks and the least amount of opt-ins as an example, but get the highest quality. Right. Like, so again, these are things, but this is a flywheel. And how would you learn that? Again, it's studying versus training, and training is doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Measuring your results called data would fall into a flywheel. And then the right measurement of data, what do most people do? They go with their gut, right? Gut stands for what? Gave up thinking. And yes, I get a lot of feedback on that, right? It's like that. There are nuances, and I'm not in any way suggesting that you ignore your gut, but at the same time, going with your gut and, not collecting data, analyzing data, using data would be, I'm thinking like trial. I don't know, be an example of trial and error in a kind of way, right? Like that's a winger strategy all day long, right? And that's not the way I would suggest. But anyway, so that's like an example of advertising. You're exactly right. You adjust the language. And then you see the data says that you're bringing in less people, but when you go all the way to cash, when you go all the way to client, all the way to cash, and then measure it out over 6, 12, 18 months, 3 years, and see who stuck with you, you can see that the people that responded to that higher level ad, like, higher level language, become the best business coach you can be, significantly can out-profit the lead generation that on naked data, on elementary sandbox data, could look like it's inferior, and that's not the case. And it'll be similar for your client.
That said, who do you target first? Do you get as many leads as possible? Or do you deal with that almost scarcity of like, oh my God, I'm only getting a couple come in?
Yeah.
Is there
great question? Yeah. So I would go to the table analogy. If you've got a table and you have one leg underneath it, you've got an umbrella, right? You got a table and you have 4 legs underneath it. Look, you could sit on it and it's probably going to hold your weight. You've got a table that has 16 legs underneath it, and a hurricane can come through and there's a good chance that your table's still going to be standing, right? So the answer is you want to be doing all of them, but you want to make sure that you know what I mean? You want to have them all going, But then it comes back to, you're going to need more staff. There's going to be more work that's going to come into doing them all simultaneously, right? But that's the answer, all.
Okay, so then that in mind, last question then, because if I'm looking at that going, wow, there's a lot of different ways, one after the other, right? Shoots, like you're not saying go out and try 5 different things all at once. Like it's that whole, right? Because how many people get caught into that trap of like, well,
Yep.
I need
Facing multiple
5 different streams of income because that's what they all say you need.
Yeah, exactly. You know my opinion on that. Then because they're doing Airbnb. By the way, that it needs to be synergistic to what you're doing, right? But the problem is they do Airbnb alongside their business, and then they're doing the stock market, and then they're investing in domain names, and then it's Bitcoin, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You want one, again, the model that I like versus, so you challenge me on multiple streams of income, which I've countless conversations on this. You got to get one stream of income to $5 million and then talk to me about diversification. Right. So anyway, that's my answer, Shoots.
Okay. What was the domain? What did you buy?
What's that?
What was the domain name that you bought?
The domain? Yep. I don't know if I should I say? Well, I got a bit of a package deal. I ended up getting 3. But the Mac Daddy was salescopy.com. So I bought salescopy.com. So there you go.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Leafs2054.com, but apparently that's not it. Hey, that's not the one. Last question. Shedeur Sanders. What's your take on every NFL team passing on him for 4 rounds?
No, it's the circus, man. It's the circus. Who you draft him, and all of a sudden, it's like Johnny Football, right? It all became about Johnny Football, and when are they going to play him? And he's the backup, and imagine the vets, and they're making $20 million a year, and everybody wants to interview the backup quarterback, and it just creates a drama. And then, not to mention, Deion Sanders comes with the package, and he's proven to be which no doubt he's an amazing father, amazing football player and baseball player and everything else, right? I love Deion Sanders, but would I want Deion Sanders involved, understanding the dynamics of a football team and the complexities of a football team? And remember, the coach's job is on the line, and the coach's, the GM's job is on the line. Would you want that circus coming to town when you've got the project that you've got? And by the way, one of the coaches anonymously came out and he said, honestly, his interview was the worst interview I've ever seen. That's like an NFL coach anonymously said almost those exact words, right? So, and when he said that, you don't need to hear the interview, no doubt, to hear that he was probably a little bit on the arrogant side, and I can't wait to turn around a franchise, and I'm going to do it my way. You know what I mean? List a little bit of that. So there's no question in my mind that that's why they all passed. They didn't want the circus. And when you see the Cleveland Browns, who eventually took them in the 5th round, the folks that were the least happy, when you because there's literally a shot, of all the executives, and it's the general manager and the coach that are giving it the golf clap. Why? Because they're the ones that have to deal with the circus. And so that's my thought. But you know what? God bless the kid, and I hope he's wildly successful. And quite frankly, if I can comfortably say this, and I think Deion Sanders would say the same, and I think he would say the same himself, best thing that could have happened, right? Because it's humble pie on freaking steroids. And this might just be, just a little bit of humility. No, a whole lot of humility is a superpower. And he might have just gotten a little bit that he needed. And this might be what propels him to become the quarterback that he ultimately thinks he can become. So that's my answer.
Sometimes we all need it. So with that, why don't you close us out? What's the one thing from today's episode?
The one thing. Look, I don't think we can ever go away from, I love the question around Flywheel, and I agree. And again, I want to encourage everybody to be trying to, and again, it's studying it. So you got to learn it, do a little bit of homework on it, read There's YouTube people significantly smarter than I and significantly more proficient with flywheels than I. Have a look at it and learn, but don't study it and then stop. You got to train on it, and you'll get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Just training your mind to think in flywheels. But I would say that the one thing would be, from a personal development standpoint, all right, be, do, have, right? That's the order. So it's your future, which is made up of your thoughts, which lead to your actions, which lead to your behaviors, which leads to the outcomes, which leads to your lifestyle, which brings you back to 12 o'clock in your future, right? You control your thoughts and you control your outcomes. You control your outcomes and you'll control your future. And I can't think of anybody listening to us in this podcast and not wanting to control your future and very importantly, help others control their future so they can show up as the best father, the best mother, the best friend, the best family, you know what I mean? The best businessman, the best CEO, the best XYZ that they possibly can. So I think there's incredible power in that. So that's what I'd say, Shoots.
Well, all right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning into another episode of Business Coaching Secrets, and stay tuned for the spinoff, Candlestick Making Secrets, starting next month. And if you're not on the inside and getting access to the pre-show, or you aren't getting Karl's daily emails, or just want more information on how to build, grow, and scale your coaching company, visit focus.com and subscribe today. Also, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe, and also share with a fellow coach, as we're trying to make our impact on as many coaches as possible. And while you're at it, leave a review and tell us what you think. And that is it for another week. We will see you in the next episode. And remember, folks, progress equals happiness. Take care, everybody.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at focused.com.